And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 68. This is the Week 10 recap episode. That's right, the Cincinnati Bengals went to Baltimore and lost in heartbreaking fashion again, 35-34. Baltimore improved to 7-3. Cincinnati Bengals fall to 4-6 on the season. In this episode, we're going to break it all down, talk about what we were looking forward to heading into this game, what we saw in the game itself, how I'm feeling about it, and how we're going to approach the rest of the season moving forward. If you're brand new to this show, go back and check out episode 0 where I explained more about myself, who I am. But you don't really care about that. You're probably more of a fan about the Bengals, I would assume, and you want to hear about that. So I know in today's modern media landscape, it's 24-hour media cycle. So the perfect time to get this podcast up would have been on Friday or maybe even Saturday. But I decided the best time to record this would be 5 days after the game when nobody cares at all. But you know what? I don't have a short memory like that. I still am thinking about this game, and the show must go on. I can't just skip a week, act like this game never happened. So I had to collect my thoughts, had to come back here. But I'll tell you, after this game ended, I wasn't feeling very positive or optimistic or hopeful for the team. This loss really kind of took it out of me as a fan. And just, there was some other stuff going on. We don't need to get into all that, but just in general, haven't been feeling overly optimistic lately, let's say. But anyway, there's still some good things. There's some amazing performances to take out of this. And it was a 1-point game. It was a close game. It came all the way down to the end. So as a football fan, NFL football spectator, this was a great game to watch. It's just that, again, the Bengals are coming out on the losing end of this, and it seems to be happening more frequently than not this season. I guess it's better than getting blown out every week. And if you look at the overall point differential, the Bengals are actually in positive territory. They still have scored more points than their opponents have this season, but they've got a losing record to show for it. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but Zac Taylor has continued to say the line about, we're still a good football team, even if our record doesn't reflect it. And we're better than our record, and yada, yada, yada. Everything's positive. Everything's always positive, upbeat, hopeful. We're going to still be in it at the end. And they are still in it, even after this loss. I keep saying that. They are still not mathematically eliminated yet. So he could turn out to be totally right. But coming into this game, one of the biggest storylines I talked about in the preview was how some of the players for the Bengals had been injured. Some of the key players, specifically T. Higgins, their star franchise tag wide receiver, and their franchise, building left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. He had also missed the last couple games because of that knee/calf injury that had been bothering him. Both of those guys did not end up playing in this game, and also Charlie Jones, the returner, special team, and also wide receiver, was not going to be active and healthy because of a groin injury in this game. Short week on Thursday, not a lot of time to recover from the previous game against the Las Vegas Raiders. So this was going to be a tough matchup, and the Bengals were 6.5-point underdogs on the road. Everything was lining up against the Bengals. And so the fact that the Bengals only lost by 1 point, you could say they did better than expected, but there's no such thing as moral victories. It doesn't matter how many points you lost by at the end of the day. Your record is not going to reflect necessarily, well, they almost, won a lot of these games. It's like, no, you have 6 losses now on the season. It doesn't matter how many points they lost by or how heartbreaking they may have been. They still lost the game, unfortunately. But the big storyline everybody was watching was going to be the battle of these two quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, maybe 1 and 2 in some people's MVP voting ballots at the current time in terms of passing statistics, passing efficiency, passing rating, all that kind of stuff. Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson this year are 1 and 2. Everybody was anticipating a very entertaining matchup between these two quarterbacks, and we were not disappointed. Both of them were just have playing as well as they had been all year. They were scrambling around, avoiding the pressure. Even when it looked like they were going to get sacked, both of them found miracle ways to escape from getting tackled, getting sacked, making some kind of pass on the run for their respective teams. So it was a good matchup of quarterbacks. Unfortunately for the Bengals, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is most of the time because the defense somehow always finds a way to give up more points than Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are able to put up on the scoreboard for the team. And Jamar Chase, let's not forget about him. He was also a big headline coming out of this game. Jamar Chase, I'll just skip ahead here. Jamar Chase had 11 catches in this game on 17 targets, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns, almost breaking his own career high for receiving yards in a game. Jamar's record was 266. He came up 2 yards short of that with 264, and he led the team in targets by far. And it's no surprise I think that's his most amount of targets he's had, 17 in a season. And part of that's because T. Higgins was not playing in the game. 9 targets went to Mike Gesicki and Chase Brown. This was his second game as the Bengals full-time every down running back now that Zach Moss is out on injured reserve. So we knew Zach Moss had that neck injury they're getting consultations about whether or not he's going to need surgery. And Zac Taylor has kind of swept all that under the rug. Didn't want to say too much about it. Just, oh, yeah, something in his neck just kind of popped up after practice on Thursday. And so they were asking him, like, well, what happened at practice on Thursday? Did he get hit in the neck? Did something... Oh, no, just, regular, everyday, career-threatening neck injury, I don't know what happened. So maybe Zac Taylor is trying to protect the team from some kind of legal liability, like if Zach Moss was put in some kind of a situation where he was more susceptible to this type of an injury or something. I don't know, but it seems kind of weird for all of a sudden a guy out of nowhere has a serious neck injury that he was just getting, just practicing. So I don't know what's up with that. But anyway, the Bengals signed running back Khalil Herbert as the rare trade, in-season trade that the Bengals did. 7th round pick for Khalil Herbert. He came in and he actually played in the game, but he came in for one play, fumbled the handoff from Joe Burrow, fell and rolled up into the back of right guard Alex Kappa's ankles, where it looked like Alex Kappa was going to be down for the count. And maybe the ball was going to go back to the Ravens. But luckily, Khalil Herbert recovered his own fumble. Alex Kappa was able to get up and continue playing. But Herbert came out of the game immediately. He came in for one play, fumbled the handoff, came right back out. So that was not a good start for his Bengals career. And on the one hand, I don't necessarily fault him too much because he was only in the building for not even a day, basically. They signed him on Tuesday. He's playing in the game on Thursday. Not very much time to get prepared. But taking a handoff from the quarterback is the most basic thing you could possibly do. Like Pop Warner, the lowest level of football, you hand the ball off to somebody else. So that shouldn't be something that needs too much, fine-tuning. But somehow he must have just taken his eyes off the ball. I don't know what. It hit him right between the whatever his numbers is. It hit him right in the chest, right in his hand, and he just dropped it from Joe Burrow. So that was a weird play. Hopefully he'll be able to contribute more because they didn't let him touch the ball after that. They were like, no more, you're out. That was a weird situation. So they basically had Chase Brown. I don't know if Travion Williams even got on the field for any pass blocking downs, but Bengals are still going to be in the market for a running back. Spoiler alert for later in the episode, but they did not find the solution at running back, let's say, with that trade so far. The trade did not yield immediate results. Some other teams are getting good returns on their trades this weekend, but Bengals, unfortunately, not so much. And that's been a theme. The free agents that the Bengals have signed, like if we think about all the players the Bengals let go in the offseason, specifically Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon continues to have a great season for the Houston Texans, racking up all kinds of touchdowns and receptions and long plays and looking good, looking spry. The plan to replace Joe Mixon has not gone well, as I just referred to with all the running backs. They're going to have to try to get signed at some point in the near future. And also just all the other players that they signed, like Geno Stone, the high-priced safety that they got, the first signing that they got. He's been one of the worst players, not only on the Bengals defense, but one of the worst safeties in the entire NFL. Not only does he not only have one interception for the entire season, but he's been missing tackles, making bad angles. He gave up a horrible touchdown where he was supposed to be the last line of defense in this game, and the receiver stiff-armed him so bad that it was like palm directly in Geno Stone's forehead. Just picture in the dictionary how to stiff-arm somebody. Geno Stone getting stiff-armed into the dirt. That was a thing that happened in this game. What else? Sheldon Rankins. He was the replacement for DJ Reader in theory, and he's wearing number 98, the same number DJ Reader was wearing when he played for the Bengals. But Sheldon Rankins doesn't play anything like DJ Reader. He's just getting blown off the ball play after play, not making much of an impact in the pass game. He's not getting any pressure on the quarterback, and he's not making any tackles in the run game. So that signing doesn't seem to be paying off huge dividends. Von Bell, they brought him in from free agency because the Carolina Panthers let him go. He hasn't been able to do much. They got a bunch of rookies playing out there on defense. They're not able to do that much. Mike Gesicki maybe is the one bright spot that they signed in free agency. He's done pretty well in terms of catching passes. He's not very much of a blocker, but at least he's a threat for the offense. But just overall, this season hasn't gone the way that the Bengals wanted, and part of that is because they don't have very good players. We can chalk it up to coaching, play calling, all that kind of stuff. Some of it just comes down to the players have to make plays, and some of these players are not making plays, and that's leading to negative outcomes for the team. Like if you don't have good players making good plays, bad things are going to happen. Oh my goodness. I'm just laughing because it's so sad, because going into this, the team and a lot of the reporters were talking about how the team was so improved from last year and everything was going to be different because the mantra that they repeated hundreds of times, the communication on defense was going to be so much better. Oh my goodness, the defense was going to be so improved. Guess what? The defense is still one of the worst defenses in the league, giving up bottom 5 in terms of points allowed on the season. They're giving up points at an unprecedented, unreasonable rate. Like Bengals offense scored 34 points in this game and they still lost. Most of the time, as an offensive player, you got to be saying to yourself, what more could I do? Yeah, they could have made more plays. Sure, everybody can make more plays, but 34 points, that's a lot of points for an NFL game. So you got to be looking at the defense on this one and saying, hey guys, can't give up 35 points. 5 touchdowns. I did the math in my head real quick. It's 7 times 5, 35. So yeah, 5 touchdowns, and that's just too many touchdowns. Can't do it. But the game, I will say this, the game, we'll get into it and go through, but the flow, the way that this game, it started off looking so good for the Bengals. Everything was looking great. Everything was going the Bengals' way. It seemed like every call was going in the Bengals' favor. just everything was lining up for a Bengals win. It was looking so positive all the way into the third quarter. Bengals were ahead by 2 touchdowns. They were ahead by 14 points, middle of the third quarter. And then that's when things started to change. Ravens got 1 touchdown. Then they got another touchdown. Then Bengals got the lead back. Oh, no, excuse me. So, actually, no. Ravens scored 3 touchdowns in a row. I take that back. Ravens scored 3 touchdowns in a row on the Bengals. So, it went from 14-point Bengals lead to all of a sudden 7-point Ravens lead. They got it tied back up 28-28, middle of the fourth quarter. Ravens, on their last possession, drove it all the way down, scored a touchdown on the Bengals defense, who could not get a stop. Bengals got the ball back with just under 2 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. They had their own drive all the way down the field. They get the touchdown and then decide to go for 2. Instead of trying to kick the extra point and force overtime and maybe try to win the game in overtime, just based on the fact that the Ravens had been scoring, it seemed like at will on the Bengals defense. They had scored 5 touchdowns and especially like 3 in a row in quick succession in this second half. I don't know what was going on with the defense. They basically just collapsed. Maybe they were tired. They'd played too much in 5-day span. Played on Sunday and then they played on Thursday night. So maybe the Ravens' physicality was too much for the Bengals defense late in the game. Overwhelmed them. I'm not going to say the M word. There was a key pivotal play in this game where Chase Brown, Bengals running back, fumbled the ball away in Bengals territory, gave the ball back to the Ravens, and they were able to score a touchdown. That was one of their first touchdowns of the second half and led to a series of scoring by the Ravens. But that didn't, one play doesn't shift everything. It doesn't change the outcome of all the rest of the plays. The Bengals defense still had to respond. They had a chance to make up for any lapses that they may have had on the previous drives the next play. They just weren't able to get it done for whatever reason. But 2-point conversion, end of the game. Bengals are down by 1. They don't get it. A lot of the fans were all upset, and Al Michaels and the Kirk Herbstreit, the announcers, were even pointing out that there were multiple penalties that could have been called against the Ravens defense on the 2-point conversion that would have given the Bengals another chance. But ultimately, the pass fell incomplete to Tanner Hudson. Joe Burrow didn't even look in the direction of Jamar Chase on this 2-point conversion. He was looking only at Tanner Hudson for whatever reason. And he tried to throw. Tanner Hudson was double covered. I think the Bengals tried to outsmart themselves, and say, okay, Jamar Chase at this point in the game has 11 catches, 3 touchdowns, 264 yards. Surely the Ravens are going to try to take him away, so we got to try to go to somebody else in this situation. Maybe somebody else besides Jamar will be open. But Kirk Herbstreit, at the last moment in the game, was circling Jamar Chase. He was going crazy, losing his mind, because he was saying, you've got Jamar Chase, one-on-one. Take the shot to Jamar Chase. Throw it to Jamar Chase. This is your best opportunity to win the game right here. And Bengals, at the end, they had 1 timeout left. So at the 2-point conversion, the ball starts on the 2-yard line. After the game, Zac Taylor, what they did was they just pretend like they were going to run a play, but then just called timeout and then went back to the huddle. Zac Taylor was saying basically you could maybe get a free play in that situation where the defense, if they jump off sides, it's going to be an offside penalty, but you could still run the play and maybe you score a touchdown, maybe you don't, but it's a redo either way. So they were trying to get a free play in that situation. Didn't end up working. But on the free play, Kirk Herbstreit was circling Jamar Chase like, okay, one-on-one on the left, you got Jamar Chase. That's what you want. And Bengals came out with a different formation for their actual play, slightly different, but Jamar Chase was one-on-one on the backside, and Joe Burrow didn't even look at Jamar, and he was open. They asked him after the game, Jamar, were you open on that 2 point conversion? He's, deadpan, as he would normally do. I'm always open. And he was. It's just that Joe Burrow never looked for whatever reason. But I can't say it's Joe Burrow's fault. Like I said, I think the Bengals maybe just outsmarted themselves because there was that play, like if you think about, I think it was against the Chiefs when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl. They had Trent Taylor, slot receiver, and they needed a 2 point conversion, and so they used Jamar Chase as kind of a decoy and had Trent Taylor go out in the flat, and they threw it to him. He was wide open, scored the 2 point conversion. I think it went to overtime. That was a huge play in the game. So there's been situations where the Bengals will go away from Jamar Chase intentionally in the big moments, but since it didn't work, obviously people are questioning it, and that's what Zac Taylor said multiple times after the game, after they lost. They were asking, why didn't you throw to Jamar Chase? Why were you throwing to Tanner Hudson, some guy who's not even good, in the most critical moment in the game? And Zac Taylor's response was, well, you're always going to question it when it doesn't work. And, well, yeah, right. That's exactly what they were doing as reporters. They were asking the question, why did you do the thing that didn't work? And this is because this is a recurring theme. He always says that, like Andre Iosivas against the Patriots in game 1. They threw it to him short of the sticks. He didn't get the first down. They're like, yo, Zac Taylor, why did you run that play? Same kind of response. It was like, well, we like that play. You're always going to question it because it didn't work. Yeah, so you need to ask. I understand he's not going to come out and say, next time, this is exactly what I'm going to do, because the opponents will know that in that next situation. So he can't say, yeah, that was a bad decision on my part, and instead of that, I should have done XYZ. But just for him, but he didn't have anything else. That was his only response was, well, it didn't work, so that's why you're questioning it. As if to say, it could have just as easily worked, just 50-50 one way or the other. It just didn't work out in that case. It could have also worked, and you would have been calling me a genius. But, there's so many plays like that have not worked where he hasn't looked like so much of an offensive genius. There are a couple other situations in this game where the Bengals decided to go for it on 4th down and didn't get it. So they didn't get any points, didn't gain any field position, gave the ball back to the Ravens with favorable field position. So it was like getting a turnover in addition to the fumble that Chase Brown gave up in the Bengals territory. That was a turnover that the Bengals weren't able to, or that the Bengals gave to the Ravens. And there was also a turnover that the Bengals didn't get where Cam Taylor-Britt looked for a moment like he had an interception of Lamar Jackson, and on the instant replay, they showed that the ball actually slipped out of his hands, hit the ground as he was coming to the ground. So it was an incomplete pass, not an interception. That proved to be costly because I think they ended up getting a touchdown after that. So it could have been a big swing, pivotal moment in the game in the Bengals' favor in that second half, but they didn't end up making the plays. There was also the other big plays. So there was some big plays from Jamar Chase. Let's stick on the positive big plays. Big plays from Jamar Chase. Most notably, he had 2 70-yard touchdown receptions. One was just a regular 20-yard in route over the middle of the field where he got in a hole in the zone. Ravens were running a lot of zone early because the Ravens' defensive backfield has been so depleted by injury and just not being experienced. They got some rookies on the team. So they've got a new defensive coordinator. Maybe his scheme isn't quite as good as the last coach. I don't know. But the Ravens' defense are pretty weird in the fact that Ravens' defense is number 1 in the NFL at stopping running plays, but last at stopping passing plays. So passing is the most effective against the Ravens' defense. And I guess that's not surprising why the Bengals threw the ball so much. I think this is the most number of passes Joe Burrow threw in a game so far this season. Let me check the box score real quick. Joe Burrow threw 56 passes in this game. He was 34 of 56, 428 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He did take 3 sacks, but only 7 yards lost on the sack. So he didn't lose a ton of yardage when he did get sacked. He mostly managed to escape the sacks, make plays on the run, find receivers in those gaps in the zones. 108.3 passer rating and a QBR of 63.2 out of 100. The completion percentage from Joe Burrow, even though he had a lot of yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, that's pretty good. The completion percentage, 34 of 56, was below Joe Burrow's season average, over 70%. His career average is over 70%. He's been near that his entire career. He was just barely over 60%, so 10% below his standard completion. But if you look on like the next gen stats, his completion percentage above expected is like 0% basically. So he completed the amount of passes he was expected to. He was just maybe some good coverage in some situations by the defense. There were some drops. There were a couple bad drops. I'm thinking of Chase Brown, the running back. Tanner Hudson had a stone cold drop. The worst drop I've seen any Bengals player make all season. Hit Tanner Hudson right between the 8 and the 7, had him right in the hands, and he just kind of turned his head and didn't secure the catch before he started running upfield. So stone cold drop. That's the guy we want to throw to on the most critical play in the game. But, I mean, Tanner Hudson did have, let me check his stats here, 6 catches. Outside of the drop, he had 6 catches on 7 targets, 42 yards, and a touchdown, long of 10. So Tanner Hudson doesn't get a lot of yak, but he did have a touchdown catch. Another scramble drill where Joe Burrow was able to find these, Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample had a touchdown on a similar type of play last week. So Joe Burrow's making those tight ends some of his favorite receivers. Mike Gesicki wasn't as effective, only 4 catches for 30 yards and no touchdowns on 9 targets, some incomplete passes. And then there were a bunch of incomplete passes to Jermaine Burton, the rookie. Now, Jermaine Burton was one of the guys we talked about last episode and last week extensively, number 81 for the Bengals. He was the rookie who missed or was basically suspended from the last game by the team for not showing up on Saturday to the meetings and didn't even call, didn't give anybody any heads up and say, hey, I'm sick, something came up. Apparently it was just like didn't even show up. And maybe there was something that happened on Friday as well. So a couple things that led to him being benched. They didn't end up taking him completely off the roster, off the sidelines. And part of that may have been because if they knew T. Higgins and Charlie Jones were going to be injured, they need Jermaine Burton to stay positive for this Thursday game. So coming into this, I was hopeful he was going to bounce back. And he only had 1 catch on 5 targets for 11 yards, no touchdowns. A couple of these were missed connections on deep pass attempts from Joe Burrow, where I can't say for sure, but it seemed like Jermaine Burton wasn't able to get any real separation at the end of these routes where you would expect Jamar Chase in those situations would have probably had that extra gear to burst and extend and catch the ball, where Jermaine Burton didn't seem like he had that same burst. And I'm not, Jermaine Burton was a 3rd round pick. He wasn't a top 5 pick like Jamar Chase. So I'm not saying he should be as explosive and fast and have the same burst as Jamar Chase. But it was just obvious because I don't think they were bad passes from Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow was throwing them, and if it were Jamar Chase, they would have been perfect passes. Basically, I think it would have been perfect if you were throwing to Jamar Chase, but because Jermaine Burton doesn't have that same speed tonight, at least Thursday night, he didn't have the speed for whatever reason. Maybe sitting at the casino all day didn't help with that. We will never know, but it didn't look like Jermaine had that same explosiveness for whatever reason. There was also a couple plays where he let Marlon Humphrey pry the ball away from him. It looked like maybe it was a defensive pass interference. Humphrey maybe got there a little bit early for the Ravens, but a good play, bang, bang play, knocked the ball away before Jermaine Burton could make the catch. So that's some rookie learning moments for Jermaine Burton in a number of ways. And not only did he hopefully learn from getting suspended, but just learning how to play in the NFL. he was kind of looking around for a pass interference flag, and maybe surprised that he didn't get one. But you're gonna get some tough calls in the NFL. It's a tough physical game, so he's still learning, and it's just too bad that it's this late in the season and he's still just barely getting his feet wet. He's barely been playing any snaps at all, so he hasn't got that experience. He's still getting that, and hopefully from here on out we'll be able to see Jermaine Burton produce more. We also got a couple catches out of Andre Yosivage. Mostly quiet night for Andre, though. 2 catches on 4 targets for 29 yards, no touchdowns. Chase Brown was also very active in the passing game. 9 catches on 11 targets, 52 yards, no touchdowns. At least 1 drop for Chase Brown. And then in the running game, Chase Brown, 42 yards on 13 carries, 1 touchdown, long of 7, average of 3.2 yards per carry. As a team, Bengals' longest rush of the night was only 7 yards, average of 3.1. Ravens didn't have any super long runs either. Derrick Henry had 68 yards, long of 11. Lamar Jackson had 33 yards, long of 10. But there was one play late in the game where Lamar Jackson, he was scrambling around to the right side. They were about on the 15 or 20 yard line, and nobody tackled Lamar Jackson, basically. Like, everybody else was worried about where he was going to throw the ball to, so they were covering the receivers down the field, but nobody accounted for Lamar just kind of creeping out and running and tiptoeing all the way up the sidelines for an additional 10 yards before somebody came over and knocked him out. He almost scored a touchdown on this play, but they just barely stopped him. I remember he went down to like the 2-yard line. They scored a touchdown right after that, but ridiculous play that the Bengals defense were just letting guys run freely, untouched. And speaking of another play, there was an 84-yard touchdown to Tylan Wallace in the third or fourth quarter, late in the game, that I think this may have, I'll have to look, I can just look real quick here. This was the touchdown that tied up the game, 21-21 in the fourth quarter. The Ravens got it, and they threw a pass to the left flat, like a short 5-yard basic out route to Tylan Wallace. Cam Taylor-Britt's guarding him one-on-one, open field tackle. All you have to do is knock him out of bounds, tackle him, short gain, no big deal. The one thing you can't do as a defender is just let him go and let him run up the sidelines. Was exactly what Cam Taylor-Britt did. He, for some reason, made this diving tackle attempt, completely left his feet, but then didn't even get a hand on the Ravens wide receiver. And the guy stayed in bounds, started going up the sidelines, and you could see on the replay, Kirk Herbstreit was calling the Bengals defenders out by name and highlighting them. They had like the Amazon Prime highlights over Logan Wilson and Geno Stone. It was like, you two specifically on national television gave up this touchdown because Logan Wilson, they stopped running. They thought Cam Taylor-Britt was going to make the tackle along the sidelines, and they weren't going to have to do anything. So they, for just half a second, not, like a ridiculous amount, but for that split second, both of those guys slowed down. They started jogging. They were like, okay, play's over. Then all of a sudden, oh, wait, Cam Taylor-Britt's flying out of bounds, not touching anybody, and this guy's still in bounds. So then Tylan Wallace takes off down the sidelines. Logan Wilson tries to recover. He's the Bengals inside linebacker, number 55. He's trying to come back and make a tackle. He actually, somehow in the tackle attempt, he's coming from behind, and the guy like stiff arms him, and he gives the guy even more speed to go. Like he ends up pushing, instead of pushing the receiver out of bounds, he actually pushes him even further down the field away from the Bengals defense. So he's like helping the guy, like, oh, here you go. Here, I'll give you a push in the back so you can go score a touchdown. And then Geno Stone's safety, he is known for taking bad angles all over the place. I saw there was another play where he took a horrible angle on a Derrick Henry run where he didn't even get a hand on Derrick Henry. He missed him so bad, he couldn't even touch him. It was like he wouldn't have even been down, not even in two-hand touch, not even in one-hand touch. But on this touchdown play with Tylan Wallace, this is the one where the guy just broke away from Logan Wilson. He's got Geno Stone. Last line of defense is Geno Stone is the only Bengals defender between this guy and 50 yards of green grass, scoring a touchdown. Bam, stiff arm right in Geno Stone's face. He goes on the ground. This guy basically like jogs into the end zone for a Ravens touchdown. Ridiculous. Totally ridiculous play by the Bengals defense. And they were asking Zac Taylor after the game, yo, what was up with that? And he was like, well, that was on the opposite sideline from our vantage point. I couldn't really see what happened on that one. Obviously, we don't want to let him score a 84-yard touchdown, but we'll have to take a look at the film and see what happened. So then the next day they were like, hey, Zac Taylor, you got to look at the film. What's up? He's like, yeah, just got to do a better job of tackling on that one and get him. Like, no shit, dude. Obviously, you got to do a better job of tackling. And then he's like, and, but those are guys that we're counting on, and they're about all the right stuff, It's like, that's great, fine. Nobody cares if what stuff they're about. I wish they would be about tackling guys. That's what I would wish that those guys were about. I don't know what their stuff, good stuff, those guys were counting on them. We're counting on them to make tackles and not give up 84-yard touchdowns. What the F? But, Zac Taylor has literally, he said it before, he's literally never played defense a single play as a player in his entire life. He does not know anything about defense. So when they ask him about defensive players or defensive scheme or anything like that, he has no clue. I don't know why they even ask him. Everything is up to the defensive coordinator. I don't think Zac Taylor has anything to do with the defensive game planning or schemes or defensive play calling, how they're going to stop somebody. It doesn't seem like he's involved in the defensive adjustments that go on throughout the game. Zac Taylor is purely focused on offense only. And so from an offensive perspective, this is a great night. And Zac Taylor, he must be thinking, wow, I did a great job as a coach because the offense scored a lot of points. And my defense, I don't know anything about that, but they gave up a bunch of points too. But I mean, I feel pretty good as a coach because I'm an offensive coach and we scored. It doesn't matter because the defense is terrible. And they're throwing this season away. They're throwing a MVP season away for Joe Burrow. They're throwing away a great performance by Jamar Chase. And on one hand, I don't know how to feel about this because the Bengals did not sign Jamar Chase to that contract extension that he deserved in the offseason. Or I can't say he deserved it, but he's proven that he's worth being one of the top one or two highest paid wide receivers in the NFL time and time again. But how many times does he have to prove that? Like, they asked Mike Gesicki after the game, have you ever seen a teammate on your team have a performance like Jamar Chase did? And he was like, yeah, Jamar Chase a couple weeks ago when he did almost the same thing against the Ravens. It's like the only type of person who can do this is Jamar Chase. He's proven it time and time again. He shouldn't have to keep going out there and proving it to everybody in the world to earn a contract from the Bengals. So we'll have to see how things progress in the offseason. And if things keep going like this, like what else? I think the only reason Jamar Chase has to play if they keep losing is just for his own pride and for his own statistics. Like, he wants to lead the league in receptions and yards and touchdowns so that he can, go to the Hall of Fame one day and cement his legacy as being an elite player. But it's a team game. So Jamar Chase can't play defense. If they lose the game, it's not because of anything Jamar Chase did or didn't do. He's out there doing everything he can to put on a winning performance for the team, but he can't win the game himself single-handedly. So it's too bad. It's a shame that the Bengals are wasting these type of performances from their great players. But from their perspective, I don't know if they even care or if this is their intention all along. Like, maybe they aren't really even concerned about winning games necessarily. Like, honestly, if they win or lose, fans, if they expect to see Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase throwing a bunch of, Joe Burrow had 4 touchdowns and 400 yards in this game. So I'm sure the next time the Bengals have a home game, the stands are going to be packed because people are going to want to see that often. They want to see touchdowns. They want to see 70-yard touchdown passes and runs to Jamar Chase. So there's going to be no shortage of eyeballs and interest in the team from that perspective, win or lose. It's just, from a fan perspective, we always want the team to win. We always want the team to have Super Bowl aspirations and have a goal of winning. And so when Zac Taylor says this is a good football team, our record doesn't show it. I mean, you could say that about a lot of football teams, though. Like, in part, I think what he's saying is, like, we're a professional football team. Yes, every team in the NFL is a professional football team. Every team is good enough to beat every other team. Like, even the worst team in the league right now has 2 wins. The Jacksonville Jaguars have the worst record with Zac Taylor's brother as their offensive play caller. And they have a 2-8 record. Like, they're not even that far behind the Bengals at this point. So every team in the league is somewhat good. So it's kind of disingenuous to sit there and say, well, we're 4-6 and we keep losing all these games, but we're a good team. We're going to be there at the end, blah, blah, blah. We'll see. We'll see. Next game is going to be against the Los Angeles Chargers, another primetime road game. I haven't looked yet. Actually, let me go and check if the Bengals are going to be underdogs. I'm assuming the Bengals are going to be underdogs in that game just because the way things have been going lately. But one thing about this was originally going to be a day afternoon game, but they flexed this game into NBC Sunday night. Primetime game. Chargers are favored by 1.5 points. That's kind of interesting because the Chargers have the better record at 6-3, and they're playing at home. So normally the home team gets a few extra points. So the fact that the Chargers, with the better record and at home, they're only favored by 1.5. The books, the gambling odds makers still favor the Bengals. So they seem to think that the Bengals are a pretty good team as well. So who am I to argue with Vegas and Zac Taylor? But again, we'll have to see. And the narrative went from even though we're 0-3, we got 14 more games left. Well, we got 13 more games left, blah, blah, blah. And then it went to, well, we still got more than half the games left to play. Season's not even halfway over yet. And at no point have they had a winning record, by the way. Like, they've always had a losing record, and they're always just barely trying to get back to 50% win rate. And they're always just on the cusp of being halfway decent. But now there's only 7 games left. So now Zac Taylor has gone with the more nebulous, plenty of more games left to play. He'll have to look up the dictionary, because last time he went to the dictionary to talk about, I think it was Amarius Mims being out for several weeks. He went to the dictionary to give us the definition of several. Very funny, Zac Taylor. So now maybe he could go to the dictionary again and tell us how many is plenty of games left. Apparently, plenty is going to be until you're mathematically eliminated. Then you will not have plenty of games left to play, and then you will just be out of games. But they're not eliminated yet. They're still in this thing, but it's going to be a tough challenge. The top 7 teams in the AFC go to the playoffs, and right now the Bengals are number 9. But they're tied with the Colts, but the Colts have a tiebreaker over the Bengals. But if the Bengals can just get a couple wins here, they could be right back in the hunt. And the thing that's crazy is the AFC is so weak that the Broncos are the number 7. They're the last playoff spot right now, and they're 5-5. They're only 1 game ahead of the Bengals. So if the Bengals can just get a couple wins, they could conceivably get into the playoffs. Now, if they actually made it to the playoffs, I'm not saying they would have a similar run. I don't think they have the same amount of talent on this year's squad that they had on that Super Bowl team, but you never know. You just want a chance. And that's part of the thing that's so alluring about the NFL is the way that they've structured the games, the schedules. The Bengals, they've got an easy schedule for the most part because they came last in their division last year. So they kind of always want to balance things out, even it out, so everybody has a chance all the way, as many games as possible. some teams are still making moves. And we did see the Bengals kicking the tires on a couple players after this loss. Obviously, Khalil Herbert, they traded for him, didn't get great initial return on the investment, so they're bringing in some other players. They brought in Leonard Fournette, but they didn't end up signing him. He's the running back, but he's getting a little bit up there in age. He was a former LSU. I think, did he win the Heisman Trophy when he was at LSU? But star player for a number of teams in the NFL as well. But he was a top 10 overall NFL pick. Never really quite lived up to that hype and anticipation he had coming out of college. But they didn't decide to sign him. They signed some other guy. I totally forget his name, so I'll have to go look here. No guy you've ever heard of, basically. I don't expect him to do a whole lot. But they just need something. They need somebody who can play running back who's not Travion Williams, because obviously he can't do it. And they're going to need somebody because Chase Brown isn't going to be able to last the rest of the season. He's not a big guy. He can't play every single play, catching, running, doing everything. So they need something. They need some juice back there, or it's going to be a long season, because if teams don't have to worry about a running game for the Bengals at all, which they already really weren't. But like last season, when you think about, they had Chase Brown and Joe Mixon, that 1-2 hammer and thunder and lightning punch. It put defenses on their heels, and both those guys were able to stay fresh and healthy for the most part all the way through the season. Chase Brown was out a couple games with that hamstring issue last year, but this year, with only having Chase Brown, it's going to be tough. I expect defenses are going to adjust to that. So Bengals offensive coaching staff is going to have to come up with something. Dan Pitcher, Zac Taylor, the rest of that team of coaches that they've got, the mind meld is going to have to come together with something to figure out how to get over the hump, because obviously they got to score a lot of points. They can't really stop anything defensively. Now, defensively, it's Lamar Jackson. Yeah, he's good. But there was a lot of bad tackling, missed tackles in the running game and the passing game. And I understand Derrick Henry is one of the best in the NFL, but Bengals defensive line getting pushed around. B.J. Hill, Sheldon Rankins, Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Osai, Chris Jenkins. I'm just naming off all the people all the people who play on the team. But all those guys were just getting pushed around. The front seven of the Bengals getting pushed around too much. They weren't able to, no sacks on Lamar Jackson. They got a couple pressures, but for the most part, Lamar could just sit back there all day and pick apart the Bengals defense. They were effective early in the game, however. The Ravens offense, they scored one touchdown early to tie the game at 7-7, but outside of that one touchdown, they had 5 punts from the Ravens offense in their first 6 possessions. So for the most part, the Bengals defense early in the game was effective at getting the Ravens off the field in 3 and outs. Like, they would only run 3 plays, punt the ball back to the Bengals offense. So that's why it was so good for the Bengals, was keeping the Ravens explosive, number 1 offense in the league, off the field completely. And so that's why it's weird that they completely collapsed in the second half, because they didn't even run that many plays. They shouldn't have been tired, the Bengals defense, because they didn't do that much in the first half. They didn't have to defend that many plays. Maybe the Ravens made adjustments. I don't know what it was, but it was just something. It looked so good. But you knew in the back of your head, Ravens were going to figure out something to come back. Even when they were down by 2 touchdowns, couldn't count the Ravens out, and just somehow they made the play. And the other thing that really kind of annoyed me was, like I said, the decision to go for 2 and then throw it to Tanner Hudson. I know Zac Taylor said you question it because it didn't work, but I would rather lose throwing it to Jamar Chase. I don't want to throw it to Tanner Hudson. throw it to Jamar Chase, and if you lose, you lose. But don't not throw it to Jamar Chase and say, well, nothing we could do. And also, they asked Zac Taylor, why did he go for two? And his immediate reaction was, we came here to win. He said it twice. He was like, we came here to win. Came here to win. But they just lost. So if you came here to win, it didn't work. It didn't work very well, coach, because you lost. So if you came here to win, it was not effective. Maybe you should have gone for overtime. A tie would have been better, but by going for two, you take the tie off the board, removes that from being one of the possible outcomes. Tie is not possible if you go for two. So he eliminated the possibility of the tie. He only wanted a binary outcome, win or lose, and he got lose on this one. It's a shame. You could say, well, this time it didn't work, but there's so many times it didn't work. Like that play, it was against the Eagles, throwing it to Jamar Chase behind the line of scrimmage again. Oh, well, Cooper DeJean came up and stopped him for like a 3-yard loss. Well, it didn't work. They got us on that one. So what can you do? At least they threw it to Jamar Chase on that, but that was just a dumb play call. But man, I don't know. I'm not totally surprised that they lost. Like I said, it was the expectation that they were probably going to lose this game anyway. But the way that they lost it, having such an advantage, up by 14 points, and then just give the game away, and then have to come back, and it seems like you're at the end of the game, and maybe you have a chance to win, and you fall short, as they have done all season. Just deflating. Like the next couple days, I felt like a balloon that somebody had, poked a hole in with the tape on it, where the air just kind of slowly deflates. The balloon doesn't explode. It just kind of slowly lets the air out of it. That's kind of what I felt like after this game, because it was like, oh man, that was a great game. Jamar Chase scoring touchdowns. I was on such a high, but then we lost, and then shucks. But hey, it could have been some kind of college football game, like Ohio State over the weekend. They beat somebody, I think maybe it's Iowa or Purdue, like 45-0. Whoop de effing do. Who cares that you beat a team 45-0? I don't understand how that's interesting to anybody. So in some warped way, this loss by 1 point was better than winning a game 45-0, I guess. But at least, hey, the next game will be coming up right around the corner. It'll be another primetime, nationally televised spotlight for the Bengals to hopefully get a win and have people saying positive things about them for once this season. It could be worse. Yeah, it could be like the Jets getting blown away and getting flexed out of the primetime game. So at least people want to see the Bengals. At least they're still somewhat relevant. But just like the calendar, the light is getting short fast out there. The days are getting shorter. The season is getting shorter. And eventually all this Zac Taylor coach speak cliches are going to run dry. There's only so many times you can hear the coach say, we're still in this, guys. Hang in there. Block out the noise. Block out the distractions. Keep coming to work, and we'll eventually, get this thing turned around. There's only so many times you can hear that before, you have your own life outside of the football field. Your wife, significant other, whatever. They're like, hey, I'm trying to book some vacations after the season is over. Where do you want to go? Like, you want to go Caribbean? We're trying to go over here, over there. You got other things on your mind besides these last couple of football games, win or lose. Maybe you don't want to go to the playoffs. Maybe you would rather the season just be over at the end of it, because the players don't really get paid that much extra to go and play in these playoff games. So some of them might not even care, honestly. Like, some of them are just, they want to put out good film of themselves. That's the biggest thing fans need to remember is fans want the team to win. The organization wants to make money. Win or lose, they don't really care. Winning is great for the bottom line, but the bottom line is the most important thing. So win or lose, they don't really care. And the players, they win or lose, they probably kind of care. They say that they care, but mostly they want to make money and stay healthy. And the best way to do that is by playing well in the game, putting out good film for other teams to see, so that if the Bengals don't want to give them a contract that they feel like they've played up to, they can go to another team, and that's their resume. That film that they put out there is their resume to say, hey, look what I did. I'm Jamar Chase. I put up 264 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. This is why you should pay me. It doesn't matter that they lost the football game. He still achieved everything that he achieved and made a case for why he should get paid millions and millions of dollars. It doesn't matter, oh, but you guys lost the football game. So what? He's still going to get paid. So that's what the players are most concerned about. And whether they went to the playoffs or not, some players may have something built into their contracts where they'll get a bonus for making it to the playoffs and playing in those playoff games. So from that perspective, some players may have incentive, but a lot of players don't. They don't really care. So it's going to be interesting to see, does Zac Taylor have that culture that they always talk about, the great culture in the locker room to keep things together when things are down. When the chips are down, Zac Taylor always knows that his guys are going to respond the right way, yada, yada, yada. We'll see. We'll see. That's all I got to say. But that was enough of a breakdown of this game as I wanted to get into. Not as detailed as I usually do, but let's just try to move on from this game and think about the Chargers in the next Week 11 game. We'll come back next episode 69, with a Week 11 preview. But until next time, don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, positive 5-star rating. Keep it positive like Zac Taylor wants. I won't even get into what Zac Taylor's wife posted on Instagram. You can go check that out for yourself if you want to hear some positivity. But anyway, come back on the next episode and we'll break it all down. But until then, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.